Welcome back, everybody. Well, I've been on the Dragonhold PTS, and I have been pretty in love with the new patch. I'm not gonna lie, there's some really cool new stuff that they've added, the new sets, and of course the changes to dots. Honestly, the Dragonhold PTS is feeling like a lot of fun, and I cannot wait for it to hit the live server. So today, I have got something special for you guys. I've been going on a hybrid binge. I've got a Warden hybrid build for you, and I am really excited to share it. It's incredibly strong, but it's something a little bit different from the hybrids you've seen from me in the past. This is kind of a pseudo hybrid. So it is a hybrid build in the sense that it uses both magicka and stamina effectively, but we are focusing more on one department than the other, and that's just kind of to retain that huge maximum burst that we kind of need in PvP, while still utilizing all those unique things that a hybrid build can offer your character that a pure build wouldn't. Long story short though, this build is really strong. It feels just as strong as a non-hybrid build, and it offers a very unique just aspect to the gameplay. So I hope that you guys really enjoy it. I am really excited to share not only this, but a whole slew of hybrid builds with you guys over the course of the next couple weeks. I will likely do every class and maybe more than one build for some of the classes as well. So look forward to that, guys. And without further ado, let's take a look at that build. So to begin, I am a Wood Elf. Now, Wood Elf is not the ideal race for this build. It's actually not a bad option. We get the 10% movement speed, and we get both penetrations on dodge roll. So we do get a nice damage bonus to both our magic and our physical damage as a Wood Elf. But, you know, there's all kinds of other races that you could pick that could give you kind of similar things, you know, Dark Elf or even Orc for the speed, and then the weapon damage, which the Palinals will turn into spell damage as well. So the race choice is kind of up to you. I would actually say Orc is probably the best choice, followed closely by things like Dark Elf and then probably Wood Elf for the penetration. But it's really up to you guys. This is a damage-focused hybrid, so I would go with a damage race if you want. You could go with any race on this build, though. To be honest, it doesn't really matter. But I do think that a stamina-focused race has some advantages over the mag-focused race for this particular spec. Now, taking a look at our max stat, we actually have pretty sweet max stat on this build. We've got 12.5k mag, we've got 23.6k HP, and 30k stamina. So some nice max stat. I want to note the HP here coming in at almost 24k. That's pretty awesome, especially considering that our build is not running any food that gives us any max HP. This is just coming from our sets and our Hacky Joes. Actually just the Hacky Joes and the Warden Passives. So we get a nice amount of HP bulk just from having the tri-stat glyphs on, which any hybrid build should have over 20k HP for that reason. Now, looking at our stamina, we've got 30k stam and 12.5k mag on the hybrid. We're definitely stamina focused here, and I think this is the best call for hybrids just kind of going into the Dragonhold patch, and I actually am digging this quite a bit. Now, in a split hybrid where we have equal stats of both would be a good option if we're in the no CP campaign, but when we take champion points into effect, we lose out on a lot of maximum damage if we have to split our champion points, and we have to split our max stat here as well. So what we've kind of done with this hybrid is it's a pseudo hybrid in the sense that we are more focused on the stamina and physical department of things, but we still have access to very powerful spells via that really high weapon damage value that we have. So this is kind of the theory behind this build, and when we get to the sets, we'll show exactly why we went this route and why the Palinal set would be a better option than something like Armor of Truth, which will give us like 600 weapon damage, right? So moving on to our sustains here, I'm going to buff up with the potion as well. And you guys can see here, we've got pretty awesome sustain. We've got, yeah, on the back bar, 1,200 magicka recovery, 2,400 stamina recovery, and 400 health recovery. So big focus on the stam recovery, and that is because a majority of our skills are stamina skills. We do have quite a few mag skills, and we do use a staff, so we can get some mag sustain back from that. However, we don't need a lot of mag sustain just due to the skills that we have. Now, when you build a pseudo hybrid, this is the part of the build that is important. Figuring out which max stat you want to focus on and which offensive dump you want to focus on. You can use both pools offensively, but you will have your primary burst offensive skills, and that's going to be your best stat. And then making the regen kind of fit the abilities that you've chosen. So this regen value that I have here and these values, etc., this kind of just reflects what we need from our hybrid. If we need to use more magicka skills on this particular build, we would put more mag sustain on it via food change or whatever. And that's something I did want to note about pseudo hybrids in general. Now, taking a look at our weapon and spell damage, yeah, you guys know what this is. 5,169 weapon and spell damage. When we fully buff up, we are just shy of 6.3k weapon and spell damage. I think we're 6,270 or something like that. Yeah, so we've got a really high amount of weapon spell damage on this build. And that's going to give us not only incredible burst on the stamina department, I mean 6.3k weapon damage, 30k stam, we're going to hit like a truck. But we also have that 6k spell damage. And packed with that little bit of magicka that we have, that's going to offer us really strong access to our magicka skills. Now, looking at the crits here, we've got 40% weapon crit and 13% spell crit. For the pseudo hybrid, I decided to omit spell crit, and that's just the choice that I think I made because we had to have certain abilities slotted, we have to have so many buffs, etc., and it's hard to fit everything in and still have the build with the skills that you want to use. So I felt like this was a better option. We still get a lot of power out of our magicka kit just from base. Now, taking a look at our physical spell resistance on this build, when we fully buffed up, we've got 20k spell and just about 20k physical resist, and we've got 2,785 critical resistance. So our defensive stats aren't crazy high, and you guys weren't expecting crazy high defensive stats from me. I know, I don't really play really bulky builds, but this is very standard medium armor defenses. There's nothing out of the ordinary here. Now, this build is actually fairly bulky, and it's not because of its high resistances. It's because this build has insane healing power. And when we play some of the footage for you guys will see just how good the healing power on this build is. It is, you can take some pretty sweet abuse on this, I'm not going to lie. Now, taking a look at the Mundus, we have got the Warrior Mundus. This is going to increase our weapon and spell damage thanks to the Pelinal set. Definitely the Mundus you want to go for here. And then we are also a Vampire on this build. Now, you don't have to be a Vampire. I just chose it because I like that the Vampire adds the additional sustain. But it's not necessary. The sustain on this build is actually fairly good, so you don't need vampirism, but, you know, for medium armor builds, I do prefer it. It just fits nicely. You get the fast sneak movement speed bonus too, which is just another aspect to the build that you can have in there. And then we've got the Lavafoot, Soup, and Saltress. Now, this food I chose because it gives max stam and stam recovery. We are a stamina-focused pseudo-hybrid, so that is literally the best stats that we can get from food. And this is the best food we can use for this build. We don't need the HP at all. I know some people like to run higher HP, but we're almost 24k. That's honestly not so bad. We don't need to run a huge amount of HP. If you keep your heals up, especially your leeching vines, you will not get bursted on this build. People will have a rough time doing it at least. Now, like I said, if we had more magicka skills that we wanted to use, for example, we could switch this food out for something that gave max stam and magicka recovery. And there are foods that do that in the game, and they'll just give us the ability to kind of give us the sustain in the departments we need them. But for this particular build, guys, if you're going to follow the same skill layout, this is the sustain pools that you want. Now, taking a look at the consumables we're using for potions, we've got the Tri-Restoration Potion. And I really like that we have access to this, especially on a hybrid build. Hybrid, like I said, needs so many buffs, and it's hard to get access to all of them. And we've just got great coverage on the Warden. We've got everything that we need. So the Tri-Restoration Potion is just the icing on the cake to give us all of our sustain pools. And yeah, that's why we're running it. Now, taking a look at the gear that we've got Balorgs on as our first set. And Balor Kenna combo for the weapon damage and the spell damage. Now, we are running Pelinals, so we don't really need to have actually Balorg or Kenna here. It could be Veladrith, for example, as another just one-piece weapon damage that will get copied over anyway. But it needs to be these two one-pieces. Don't be tempted to run Molag Kenna here. You could actually go for the two-piece Balorg if you want, but to be honest, I think you get better mileage out of the two separate one-pieces there. Now, taking a look at this five-piece, you guys know we're running the Pelinals hybrid. You guys probably have seen this set before. Max health, both recoveries. Your spell and weapon damage both become the highest of two values. So the theory behind this build is we just build a basic stamina damage build. We stack weapon damage as high as we can, and we run the Pelinal set to turn it into spell damage, offering us unique utility in our kit. So yeah, really, really good for that reason. And I'll come back to Pelinals after we take a look at the rest of the sets. The next set that we have is the New Moon Acolyte, and man, this is such a beautiful set for PvP. Weapon crit, weapon damage, physical penetration, spell crit, spell damage, spell penetration. That is insane. Just that 2, 3, 4 line is absolutely nuts. We get both from both lines. It's great for the hybrid. The big thing that we get here that the hybrid really benefits from, especially a Pelinal's hybrid, which is copying over the weapon damage anyway, is that additional spell crit and that additional spell penetration. That's just icing on the cake. Now, 481 weapon and spell damage on the 5-piece, but all of our active abilities are increased in cost by 5%. Really, really good for a burst build. Our active abilities on our front bar, we oftentimes won't be spending a lot of time here unless we're going in for that kill. So for the sake of PvP, this is one of, if not the best burst set in the game now. And I really like this set because of how flexible it is, and it just fits into a hybrid really fantastically as well. So yeah, we've got the New Moon's Acolyte on the front bar. Now, taking a look at our off bar here, I've got an Inferno Staff of Stendarr, just for a little bit of Magicka recovery. Now, this is up to you what you want to run on the back bar. For this particular build, I would recommend that 2-piece Magicka recovery, though. It doesn't have to be the Stendarr set, just that 2-piece mag recovery to give you a little bit more sustain when you're on your staff bar. The mag sustain on this build is what we need. It's just at what we need. You don't have a lot of extra to work with, so having this little bit of extra on the back, I think, is good. So, back to the Pelinals set. Now, why would we pick Pelinals over maybe something like Armor of the Truth? And I think this is a great example set to match Pelinals up against, because what does Pelinals really give us versus Truth? Truth is going to give us better damage and healing overall, and we have that really high off-balance uptime on this build thanks to the Warden changes in this patch. Truth is giving us way more for our build than Pelinals is figuratively, right? Statistically, just if we look at it on page, Truth will be giving us more. But what does Pelinals give us that makes it so worthwhile? Well, we are running Leeching Vines. And Leeching Vines, if you guys don't know, is a really fantastic heal over time that the Warden gets. And every time they take damage, they'll heal themselves, and this is on a 1-second cooldown. And it applies the minor health steal as well. Being a pseudo-hybrid gives our Leeching Vines on this build a nice, beefy tooltip. 2,500 health every 1 second off our Leeching Vines. That's a lot of additional healing power that we didn't have going for the stamina build before. So if we compare this to what we would have with the Truth set on, we are getting the equivalent of over 1.5k or so health recovery in like raw healing power from Leeching Vines versus the Truth set. So that's one thing our Pelinals 5-piece is giving us. We can erase what it says there and just chalk it up to 1.5k health recovery. That works on a vampire because it's healing power, which is super fantastic. And then the next bit that we get is, of course, access to those really strong Warden passives. And this is something that a Stamina Warden would not feel inclined to run because they don't get the healing power from this skill, and they'd only be getting that major mending and the additional resource sustain from Nature's Gift as well. But we just get to really utilize this ability. Thanks for going for the Pelinals set on this build. So the way that I look at Pelinals on this particular hybrid is that it's giving us access to a skill set that we didn't have access to before. And the way that we've done it with the Warden works that just makes the 5-piece such a fantastic addition to our build. Now, taking a look at the traits that we've got on this build, we've got Infused with the weapon spell damage on the back bar. Definitely what we want here to increase our outgoing damage. The Flame Staff, also a ranged weapon, so we can proc this very often. Now, the New Moon Greatsword, we have got Nirnhoned with the Minor Brutality Poison. This is the poison you want to go for on a hybrid, man. This gets us over that 6k weapon spell damage value, and we've got a lot of Greatsword skills on our front bar, so we will have an easy time proccing this as well. Now, taking a look at the jewelry, we've got Infused with full weapon damage. Again, we got to stack that weapon damage. This is the way to go. And then on the gear, guys, we have got full impenetrable, a single well-fitted, and then all tri-stat Hacky Joes. Now, full impen, of course, because we are in PvP, full impen is a must-have. One well-fitted for medium armor. I thought it wouldn't hurt. And then the Hacky Joes. This is not only going to give us both Magicka and Stamina, buffing both our healing power and our outgoing damage, but it is also going to give us that supplemental hit points that we're kind of missing on this build. All right, so let's take a look at the abilities we're running on this spec. So we're going to start off on our offensive bar here. The first skill we have is Executioner. This is going to be our primary kill move for the build. You can actually go for the AoE morph of this if you want. I prefer the single target one, but we do have some pretty nice AoE pressure with the Subterranean, and we're even running Onslaught, and that's a splash now too. So you could go for the AoE morph. It's kind of up to you, but yeah, definitely want to have an execute on this spec to finish your opponents off. Now, the next skill that we have is Critical Rush, and I do want to buff up to show you guys the tooltip. 7.7k tooltip on the Crit Rush. Comparatively to a build like my Stamina Templar that I play, which is a really high damage burst build, it has the same tooltip value as this. This hybrid, the damage on this hybrid is as good as, if not even better, than most burst builds that you will find in PvP. And it's because we have gone for that stamina-focused damage on this build. We've got Magicka aspects to it, which we'll get into, but the stamina is the focus here, and that's why we retain these really high tooltips on our abilities. Crit Rush, of course, the primary gap closer for the build. For this build, Crit Rush is an absolute must-have. The synergy with the off-balance, off the cutting dive, the partial charged heavy, into the weapon swap, and then the Crit Rush. It is so beautiful, and you can deliver such a deadly combo with your Subterranean, but we'll get into that in a sec. So yeah, an absolute must-have for the build. Now, it is a guaranteed critical strike when you land, which is great for its outgoing damage, and it's also great to proc our Camouflaged Hunter, which gives us the minor berserk when we crit an opponent from their flank, and that will last for 5 seconds. The minor berserk is just going to give us that increased outgoing damage to both our magic and our healing, so absolutely fantastic. And of course, slotting the Camo Hunter will give us the minor savagery buff as well, and some additional weapon damage, which is transferred over into spell damage. Yeah, man, this is literally the most valuable passive slot for a hybrid. And we have a hybrid Sork that I'll be showing you guys in another day or two, and we're not using this, so please don't be mad. But yeah, this is so valuable. So we definitely want the Camo Hunter here for everything that it offers our build. Now, the next ability we have is Rally. This is our primary stamina heal for the build. Actually, it's the primary stamina burst heal for the build. We've got a huge amount of healing power, and this is going to be the burst portion of it. It's going to be access to our Major Brutality buff as well, and the minor endurance buff, so we get sustained from it. Now, the Major Brutality is so important because that is copied over into spell damage, right? A question I get a lot with hybrids is, why don't you need the Major Sorcery buff as well? It's because it takes the value of your weapon damage and the value of your spell damage, and then makes it the higher of the two. So going for the Major Sorcery buff will not increase our weapon damage, so therefore it will not increase the copied over value that becomes our spell damage. So we only need the weapon damage buff here for this Pelinal hybrid. And then finally, guys, the last ability we've got here is Subterranean Assault. I'm going to buff up so you guys can see the tooltip on this again. 17.4k. Keep in mind, all of these tooltips are without Minor Berserk, so there's an additional 8% damage on that when we proc our Minor Berserk. Yeah, man, this hits so hard. It's going to apply the Major Fracture as well, just giving us penetration on top. The damage on this build is absolutely nuts. We can do some real big hurt with this hybrid build. And then last but not least, the combo with our Crit Rush. The fact that we can stun someone with a partial charged heavy attack on our staff bar, swap to the front bar, and Crit Rush as the Subterranean goes off on them, it's just such a huge damage combo, and people have a really hard time dealing with it. You guys will really appreciate the off-balance mechanic on the Warden, I think. It is really, really cool in the Dragonhold patch. And there's so much synergy with the Warden skills with this off-balance mechanic. Now, moving on finally to our ultimate, we have got Onslaught. And again, I have to praise the off-balance mechanic for making me want to run Onslaught. The fact that we can easily set an opponent off balance means that we can easily do a partial charged heavy and then get that cast time on the Onslaught off to make sure that we land it and our opponent doesn't dodge it. We got a 22k tooltip on this bad boy almost. Absolutely savage. This ignores the target's physical and spell resist and then gives us penetration equal to the amount ignored for 5 seconds. So yeah, not only do we hit like a truck, but we have armor pierce as well, so we can strip the armor off our target and then really tear them. Yeah, that's all I can say. This is a very, very powerful damage kit, and as you guys can see, because we're a pseudo hybrid, this is all stamina on the front bar. This is our stamina-based burst bar. Now, taking a look at our back bar here. So the first thing I want to mention about the back bar is that we are using a Fire Staff. Now, Fire Staff is a great option because it increases the base damage on our cutting dive, giving us a little bit more damage going into our combo. But I will say this. With the Fire Staff, you don't get as much damage with your light attacks as you could with the bow. So bow is actually a total viable option on the back bar. The plus of Fire Staff, again, is that it gives us access to, of course, the Fire Staff skills, namely the Destro alt. And, of course, we can get Magicka back, but it's going to deal a little bit less damage than the bow for our light and heavy attacks on the back bar. It's not a huge part of our damage combo, so I thought running the Fire Staff for Flare was more than okay. It's up to you guys what you want to do here. I personally would recommend the Fire Staff. You could go Frost Staff back here, but we don't have the mag sustain for it. If you want to go Frost Staff, I would recommend maybe trying a different approach to this kind of hybrid. So Cutting Dive is the first skill that we've got here, and this is going to be our most important ability for this build pretty much. It's going to deal a decent amount of damage. I mean, when we buff up, we got a nice tooltip on it, 9,400, and when we swap to the front bar, we get even more, 11k tooltip on the Cutting Dive. So a nice amount of damage. And then if we're more than 7 meters away from the target, we will set them off balance. And of course, if we set them off balance, we cause them to bleed for 8k physical damage over 7 seconds. So we got a dot on this, we got the off balance, and we've got a beefy damage tooltip. Now the off balance on this is what sets the combos, like I've said. You go for the off balance, the partial charge staff heavy into the crit rush. The Subterranean goes off with it too. You get such a beautiful combo on your opponent by using this ability. Now the off balance, again, synergizing with our onslaught, like I said earlier. Just everything about it is great. And of course, it will increase the amount of damage that our opponent takes, which is fantastic too. So there you go. The Cutting Dive is probably the most important spammable / utility skill that we use on this build, and it makes for a pretty fun staff bar for the Hybrid Warden. Now, taking a look at the next ability, we've got Resolving Vigor. This is your flex skill. I would recommend putting a defensive skill here, as our offensive combo is already filled with everything it needs, and we hit hard enough. Resolving Vigor is going to be absolutely fantastic for this build. We've got a huge tooltip on it. We're going to look at the front bar tooltips, because on the front bar, the healing is based off your front bar still. 22k, and then we get Major Mending. So our Vigor tooltip is almost at 30k on the hybrid when we have the Mending buff up. Yeah, that's why I went for it. I mean, I meant it when I said the healing power on this build is pretty insane, and Vigor is a huge part of that. Now, moving on to our next ability, we've got Race Against Time. This is crucial for this build. We need the snare removal, we need the expedition, and of course, this gives us the minor force buff, which is going to give us that huge burst on our front bar as well. Yeah, just packing big damage and big mobility with this ability. Very important for this build. This is actually going to be your primary Magicka dump for the build. Outside of Race Against Time, you'll just be using the Leeching Vines for the passive that it kind of gives. You could actually switch out to a different morph of Leeching Vines, and I guess we'll move to this skill now. Leeching Vines I picked for that really strong heal over time. This is why we have the Pelinal set on. It gives us that powerful heal, that access to the Major Mending when we really need it. And of course, we get the Resource Restore from this being a mending skill and ticking on us very frequently. So we get a lot of sustain from using this skill. So you can go for the other morph here that gives you the burst heal as well. The big plus of this is that we have a Magicka utility skill that gives us all this healing power, and we don't have to spend stamina on this healing. So it gives us a little bit of a rest for our stamina bar, but I'm not going to lie, the amount of synergy that we get in this build just from this one skill is pretty insane. And then, of course, the Leeching Vines tooltip when we fully buff it up for you guys on the front bar again, 2,500. Yeah, we've got some really good heal every 1 second. Now, we don't have the highest crit rate, but yeah, that's a lot of healing power. I don't think we can deny that. And, of course, with Major Mending, this will go well over 3,000. Now, taking a look at the last ability we have here, Ice Fortress. This is going to be our armor buff and minor protection. Both fantastic for the build, both things that we need. Just kind of a basic Magicka dump for the buff there. And then last but not least, we have got Eye of the Flame. Now, it's up to you guys what you want to run for your back bar ultimate. I went Eye of the Flame because I wanted to run Destro staff, and I wanted to use the Destro ultimate on the Warden because I thought it would be a lot of fun with the Warden's Subterranean Assault. I did enjoy using it in my test runs against NPCs and stuff, but in a duel, it's not the best, maybe against the Nightblade. To be honest, you can go with any skill you want here. Eye of the Flame's a good choice because it's hilarious, but you can always go for the Winter's Embrace Northern Storm. It, of course, will deal a lot less damage than Eye of the Flame, but it lasts a little bit longer, and you get the snare as well as the major protection. All right, now moving on to the champion points, guys. We're going to start off in the tower tree. We've got 40 Warlord and 14 in bashing focus. We've got to break free and we've got to bash, both very important. The reason we have bashing focus is because, well, bash is going to be an additional bit of damage on our combo. And the amount of damage that the bash actually gives us on our burst is pretty sweet. It's like 10-15% more damage on top of whatever we're doing. So it is important that I think we have a little bit of sustain going into that. And I've got a little bit in Sprinter. Now, taking a look at the Lover Tree, we've got it nice and stacked. 64 Mooncalf, 64 in Arcanist. If you don't want to, if you want to invest more into the heavy attack sustain, you can always put some in here. It's totally up to you. It's a double whammy because we have both the staff and the greatsword, so we can get both resources back with our heavy attacks. Now, the important passive we get here, of course, is Wind Running. Got to have that movement speed. Ideally, actually, I think we should take like 20 points out of Arcanist and put it here because we don't need that much mag sustain. Now, moving on to the Shadow Tree, we got 40 Tumbling and 40 Shadow Ward. Really nice Shadow Tree, in my opinion. We've got a roll dodge and we've got a block, especially medium armor. We've got lots of rolling going on. But blocking, nonetheless, a great defensive tactic for PvP for any build, regardless of armor weight. So we invest the points there. Now, for our blue trees, we've got nothing in the Apprentice. And the reason why is because we're not using any Magicka offensive skills. We have a full stamina offensive kit minus the Destro Staff light attacks. So it was not worth putting points in here just for the light attacks. So we did not put any points in here. We omit the spell precision and stuff like that. If you really wanted, you could actually put 30 points in here. And I would put it just into penetration. Or perhaps into Blessed or even Elfborn. We have a really low crit rate. I would say if you're going just for the damage, just penetration. But yeah, I really don't think it's worth it. Now, the reason I say 30 might be worth it is because we get the 9% additional crit, so maybe some Elfborn. But anyway, moving on to the Atronach Tree, you definitely want 120 points here. We got 81 Mastered Arms, 19 Physical Weapon Expert, 9 in Staff Expert, and 11 Shattering Blows. Yeah, I know. Don't ask weird questions. Mastered Arm's going to be so important. We've got nothing but burst outside of the one bleed. So this is going to increase our outgoing damage with pretty much all our abilities. Physical Weapon Expert, we've got the most points out of the 3 because our greatsword does the most damage. Staff Expert followed up with, because our staff is going to deal a little bit of damage too. Shattering Blows in the middle because, well, damage shields are the worst. So there we go. I just had to put the points here somewhere. If you are rocking bow and greatsword, I would say put it all Physical Weapon Expert. But if you're using the staff, I think this spread is probably the best. If you don't have to do Shattering Blows, you could put that in Physical Weapon or even a little bit more in Staff too. The important passive we get here is Tactician. We use Roll Dodge to set an opponent off balance. Now, we have the off balance with our birds, but we don't have an off balance if an opponent is really close to us. And against the melee combatant, I had a really good fight against Liar, and I learned that we need to have that kind of Roll Dodge when someone's close to us, the ability to off balance them so we can stun them to alleviate pressure. So there we go. Tactician is a must-have. This build is all about off-balance. We've got lots of sources of it. Now, moving on to the Ritual Tree, we got 49 Mighty, 50 Piercing, and 51 Precise Strikes. Nice even spread here. We are stamina damage focused. We've got no damage over time minus the bleed, so we don't focus on that at all. But yeah, nice even dump just to give us some good burst. We got a good crit rate, so we can take advantage of Precise Strikes, especially with Crit Rush. And then, of course, the important passives we get are Perfect Strike, 9% additional weapon critical. Exploiter for 10% additional damage against an off-balance opponent. This includes Magicka damage as well, even though it's just our staff. This is an additional damage bonus. And then finally, we get the Last Stand. When we fall below 20% health, we gain Major Heroism, gaining 3 ultimate. Our healing power is insane, so if we do fall below 20 and we can catch ourselves, we will likely get back up to full health and get good usage out of Last Stand. Now, taking a look at the red tree, guys, we have got 61 Ironclad, 50 Resistant, 20 Spell Shield, and 20 in Medium Armor Focus. A typical red tree for me, I think. Incoming direct damage is going to be a big deal again in the Dragonhold patch, so you definitely want to be resistant against that. Crit resist is part of the burst too, so very important. And then just a little bit of passive armor bulk there. Now, taking a look at the Lady Tree, we've got a nice even spread, 27, 27, 28. Reduce incoming physical, incoming magical, and incoming damage over time. Now, in the Dragonhold patch, the healing on this is so good, we could honestly omit a bit of thick skin and put it even into quick recovery. And when we take a look at quick recovery, you see I've got 37 points here. You could put more in there, there if you wanted to. I would say play around with the build and decide for yourself whether you need the thick skin or not, just because the Leeching Vines Vigor combo is so good against damage over time. We've got that healing power for sure. But otherwise, that is the build, guys. Alright guys, so let's jump into some PvP commentary. So unfortunately we are on the PTS, so I can't do any world PvP with this build, and it would be nice to do it with this particular build because we are pretty mobile on it, but we did have the opportunity to get some duels in, which is really awesome, and a huge shout out to everybody who came in to help out with the duels. I was able to learn a lot from my experience playing the build, so yeah, without further ado, let's get into that PvP commentary. So this fight here I had against Kopis on his Magicka Warden, and he is using a big Frost build. He's got a lot of AoE damage and a lot of control, so we're just kind of trying to kite him out and then get him with that off-balance combo from our partial charged heavy into the crit rush. And there you see we just go for a full heavy attack there. We really didn't need to do that, just kind of still learning the build. We set him off balance, and I try to get the off-balance stun there, but he still has his CC immunity up. I believe that we had stunned him earlier with the off-balance there, and I just keep hitting him with the pokes there with the staff, trying to get the stuns with our birds as well. And you guys can see just how effective of a distance stun this works. As long as we're fighting another range build, it's really easy for us to set that off balance. So here I try to go for a little bit more pressure. We have him off balance, and I get him with the partial charged heavy into the onslaught after missing that combo there, and then we just keep the pressure up while we have the armor pierce, and we manage to get him with the subterranean partial charged heavy executioner to finish him off. Now, for our next fight with Kopis here, we go at it again, and I engage with him right away, just putting the pressure on with my birds, and we get that nice off-balance stun. Now, the big trick to playing, I think, this build is that you need to get really used to using the partial charged heavy attacks. You never want to go for that full heavy to get the stun, but those little partial charged heavies are so useful. And there you see I went in on that combo, and we didn't get the partial charge stun on him, which in turn allowed Kopis to set the trap and retaliate with a big smack of his own. Now, for our next fight here, we fought against Daffin, and he's coming at us with a Stamina Sorcerer. So against the Stamp Sorc, we've got a situation where the opponent is going to be on top of us rather than away from us with the melee-based Stamp Sorc. There you see we still were able to set him off balance by using the birds and roll dodging backwards. I don't think we dodged his attack to set it there. I found that if you roll as you cast the bird skill, because there's a delay before the skill hits your target, as long as you rolled 7 meters or further away from your target, regardless of how close you were to when you casted it, you'll still get the off balance on them. And here you see he's actually put a lot of pressure into us and started to really work our stamina bar there. And I think the reason that we took so much pressure is because I didn't keep my vines up properly and I over-rolled to defend myself. One thing that we're doing here that's wrong is I'm not using Vigor, and we really should be using Vigor against him, especially because he has so much physical pressure on top of us. We should keep the Vigor up, we should keep the vines up, and try to channel those greatsword heavies in his face and get those rolls in order to set him off balance. There you see we get the roll dodge to set him off balance, and that's why we've got the CP that's going into our off balance on this build as well. It's very important that we can actually get a melee target off balance reliably by using something like the roll. And he had CC immunity for the longest time there. He hit us with his wrecking blow. He sets us off balance, but notice how he doesn't utilize the stun off our off balance at all. He is playing defensively here, but he could have weaved in a partial charge heavy to stop us from rotating on him there. And we just reset our buffs. We're going to reset our subterranean combo, get him with a nice little cheeky stun off the off balance there, and we just keep rotating it on him. And a good dodge there. He's reset off balance. Now we've got the partial charged heavy into the onslaught and the executioner for the killing move. And just going to show off how you can really utilize that off balance mechanic as a tricky stun to ensure that you land something like a cast time ability like the onslaught. Now, we did fight him again, guys, and I did want to include both fights that we had with Daffin here. So big shout out to Kopis and Daffin for doing some duels with me. I also had some duels with Liar, but unfortunately, I didn't hit the record button on those bad boys. And yeah, if you guys want to see them, you can always check out the VOD of that stream. We are sponsored by What the Fast. It's a VPN for gamers. They give you better ping to your favorite games, and they are free to try for the first 30 days. No credit card to sign up via the link below. And then last but not least, if you guys really love the show and you want to help support it, you can always become a patron on Patreon. Without you guys watching, I wouldn't be able to do this job. So thank you guys just for tuning in today, and I hope to see you again next time. More hybrid love in the future. Have a great night, guys.